righty now, we are live.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. We are so excited. We are so excited. We are so excited to see you for another Tuesday at 1 p.m. Bible study. We're thanking you in advance for joining us. We thank you so much in advance for joining us. We want to let you know, please, we've had to shift our Bible study. So our Bible study is Tuesdays at 1 o'clock. Please mark your calendar. Tell a friend. No more Tuesday at 12 noon, but Tuesday at 1 o'clock. Okay, family? So thank you for attending on today. We've got amazing, wonderful Bible study planned on today. I want to let you know something. We have been in this awesome book. I'm going to place the title of the book on our screen for a moment. We have been in this amazing, awesome, wonderful book called Psalms for Black Lives, where we are examining particular psalms and how particular psalms are an act of liberation. And so I'm so excited about this book. I hope you have an opportunity to purchase this book. This is an amazing book by Gabby Cujo Wilkes and Andrew Wilkes. The foreword is by Otis Moss III, Psalms for Black Lives. In some sense, we have gotten into a habit of reading devotionals of various kinds, but the Psalms, this book in particular, reminds us that the Psalms can be a wonderful source of inspiration for us. And so please, let us take serious delving into thinking about the Psalms and the ways in which we can find encouragement in the Psalms. The particular Psalm that we are reflecting on now at this time is one that is no stranger to us. I'm going to ask that you grab pen and paper. And check out this amazing Psalm. It is Psalm 22. Psalm 22. If you have your Bibles, you can feel free to check out this Psalm from your Bible. I hope you have the New Revised Standard version. It's always best to check out the New Revised Standard version as part of the United Church of Christ. That is the version that our denomination in particular attempts to lift up that particular interpretation. So please check out Psalms 22. That's right. Turn to Psalms 22. And I'm going to begin by lifting up this particular scripture that you see here on your screen. Psalms 22. My God, why have you forsaken me? Why are you so far from helping me? From the words of my groaning. Oh my God, I cry by day, but you do not answer, and by night, but find no rest. Yet you are holy, enthroned on the praises of Israel. In you, our ancestors trusted. They trusted and you delivered them. To you they cried and were saved. In you they trusted and were not put to shame. But I am a worm and not human, scorned by others and despised by the people. All who seek me mock me. They make mouths at me. They shake their heads. Commit your cause to the Lord. Let him deliver. Let God rescue the one in whom he delights. Yet it was you who took me from the womb. You kept me safe on my mother's breast. On you I was cast from my birth. And since my mother bore me, you have been my God. Do not be far from me, for trouble is near. This particular passage continues, and there is no one to help. Many bulls encircle me. Strong bulls of Bashan surround me. They open wide their mouths at me like a ravening and roaring lion. I am poured out like water, and all my bones are out of joint. My heart is like wax. It is melted within my breast. My mouth is dried up like a potsherd, and my tongue sticks to my jaws. You lay me in the dust of death, for dogs are all around me. A company of evildoers encircles me. My hands and feet have shriveled. I can count all my bones. They stare and gloat over me. They divide my clothes among themselves, and for my clothing they cast lots. But you, O Lord, do not be far away. O my help, come quickly to my aid. Deliver my soul from the sword, my life from the power of the dog. Save me from the mouth of the lion. From the horns of the wild oxen, you have rescued me. I will tell of your name to my brothers and sisters. In the midst of the congregation, I will praise you. You who fear the Lord, praise him. All you offspring of Jacob, glorify him. Stand in awe of him, all you offsprings of Israel, for he did not despise or abhor the affliction of the afflicted. He did not hide his face from me, but heard when I cried to him. From you comes my praise in the great congregation. My vows I will pay before those who fear him. The poor shall eat and be satisfied. Those who seek him shall praise the Lord. May your hearts live forever. All the ends of the earth shall remember and turn to the Lord, and all the families of the nations shall worship before him. For dominion belongs to the Lord, and he rules over the nations. To him indeed shall all who sleep in the earth bow down. Before him shall bow all who go down to the dust, and I shall live for him. Prosperity will serve him. Future generations will be told about the Lord and proclaim his deliverance to a people yet unborn, saying that he has done it. Thus ends the reading. This is Psalm 22. It sits close nearby Psalm 23. We often don't pay a lot of attention to Psalm 22 because oftentimes we focus our attention on Psalms 23, right? Psalms 23 is the most popular of these particular Psalms, but our writers in this chapter desire to help us see an interesting perspective, if you will. The writers are inviting us to think about the power of Psalm 22 because, different from Psalm 23, Psalm 22 provides a wonderful strategy or intervention for us to employ. Please, family, I hope you have your pen and paper with you during this time. Psalm 22 employs a wonderful, wonderful strategy. I want to ask you a question. In the past, when you have found yourself in a particular crisis, how did you handle that crisis? How did you handle that? How did you handle that crisis? Oftentimes, when we meet crisis in life, we wrestle with amnesia. That's right. When we meet crisis in life, because of the sadness, the fear, the scare that we may experience in the middle of that crisis, sometimes crisis causes us to be forgetful. That's right. All of us experience 6 major feelings, according to a psychologist by the name of Gloria Wilcox. Those 6 major feelings are sad, mad, scared, peaceful, joyful, powerful. Again, those 6 major feelings are sad, mad, scared, peaceful, joyful, powerful. And in some sense, what makes feeling sad, mad, scared, or peaceful, joyful, powerful difficult is, unfortunately, those feelings cause a sense of amnesia. All of us experience sad, mad, and scared, as we see on this feeling wheel created by Dr. Gloria Wilcox. But the hard work or the difficult work ahead of us is when we feel sad, mad, or scared, how do we practice the art of remembering? How do we practice the art of remembering? Remembering. Do you know that the act of remembering is actually a self-care strategy? Let's talk about it. The act of remembering is actually a self-care strategy. There is a famous pastoral care theologian by the name of Edward Wimberly. Edward Wimberly, who wrote this amazing book, I hope you can grab it, called Recalling Our Stories. Recalling Our Stories. You can check that book out on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, or you can simply Google the title and check it out at your local bookstore. In some sense, our author highlights for us, Dr. Edward Wimberly, this notion or some sense that remembering is a wonderful self-care strategy or technique when we find ourselves in crisis. What do I mean by that? I'm so glad you asked. The art of remembering helps us begin to play back past experiences of when God delivered us, brought us through, or provided for us when we were in a crisis. And that act of remembering will begin to serve us in our present crisis. So we participate in this act of remembering all the time, especially on Sunday mornings during worship, when Pastor Jackson is preaching and lifts up particular Bible passages about biblical characters who were in similar circumstances. This is an act of remembering what happened to past biblical characters and the ways in which we will read or discover that God was with them, and then remembering their story begins to encourage us in our present day crisis when we are listening to the sermon on Sunday morning. We not only remember the stories of biblical characters, but Dr. Edward Wimberly says we can also remember our own life events. We could sit down and remember the particular life stories and crises that we faced in the past, and how the same way we survived those crises, that will give us encouragement to survive our current crisis. And last but not least, we also remember the stories of our culture and our cultural heritage, such as the African and African-American stories of how our foreparents found themselves in crisis. But by us remembering those stories, those provide encouragement for us today. So Dr. Edward Wimberly says, in some sense, our job is to hone in on 3 stories. Please, family, I hope you have some pen and paper to write this down. We want to have always in our mind, stored in our mental Rolodex, 3 stories, 3 types of stories that we can always call into our remembrance. The first story is a particular biblical passage of a biblical character who experienced crisis, trauma, and what they did to survive that crisis or trauma. What they did, in some sense, to overcome that crisis and trauma. Our job is to tap into that story. Our job is to remember that story. So I want to pause for a second and ask, all of us should have a particular biblical story that we lean on so that when we face crisis, we can remember that story, and that story begins to minister to us. What's your favorite biblical story? And if you don't have one, the first lesson or learning for us today is to get one. Think of a biblical story that will encourage you when you find yourself wrestling with crisis. So I'm going to pause there for a moment. Tell me a biblical story that sits with you when you think about particular crisis in your life. My favorite, I'll go first. A particular story that I like to reflect on when I think about crisis in my own life is the story of Esther and the moral courage that Esther had to exude in an unfair system that forced her to go and talk to the king. That interpretation is a womanist interpretation. Oftentimes, we lift up the story of Esther as Esther, in some sense, was somehow hiding being in the king's court. Esther forgot who she was. She didn't want to be true anymore to her Jewish tradition and culture. But womanist perspective lifts up a different interpretation in some sense that no, it was in fact Esther who was a victim, that Mordecai had placed her uncle cousin, in a predicament where her life was being sacrificed, right? Mordecai, in some sense, placed her in a particular predicament that wasn't fair. That while she had to go and be an advocate on behalf of the Jewish people, her own life wasn't honored and respected in some sense. I like to tell myself about the story of Esther when I experience crisis, right? To give myself a sense of encouragement. What biblical story stands out for you? I'll pause there for a minute.
Right now, we have some people on. Nobody has given their story.
Okay.
But while we're waiting, I'll share mine. My go-to generally, there are a couple, but I think the one my go-to is Daniel. And it's not Daniel, it's not Daniel in the lion's den. It's Daniel in chapter 10. Daniel has had a traumatizing vision and dream about the plight of his people, and they're in exile in Babylon. And so he fasted 3 weeks to try to get some answer to the story and to the vision, and it didn't come. So it says the last day of the 3 weeks, he was out by the river. He was agonizing, and all of a sudden, the angel Gabriel shows up, and I'll cut to the chase. Gabriel tells him, he says, from the first day that you prayed to get an answer, it was already sent. He said, but the demon over Persia was preventing me from getting to you. He said, I had to fight that demon. He said, the only way I got loose, I had to call the archangel Michael to come take up the battle so I can get this word to you. And he said, here is the word I need to get to you. And that story sends chills in me, because oftentimes we think our prayers are unanswered. And we don't realize that we live also not only in the physical world, but the spiritual. And there are some forces that are trying to prevent us from getting the insight, the understanding, the clarity, the answers, that we need. It is a battle. So that's mine, that Daniel 10. Oh yeah. So y'all, come on, y'all. What's your favorite biblical story? Somebody will post up in a few though.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for that. I hadn't heard about that story in a while. So thank you. I totally forgotten about that story. That's a powerful story.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Dr. Edward Wimberly says another story that we should be able to recall to ourselves. Another story that we should be able to recall to ourselves, and in some sense is now, in addition to a biblical story, think about your own life and think about a time when you were in crisis and you felt like all hope it was gone. And all of a suddenly, God delivered an answer. God fixed it like only God can. In some sense, how has that story served you? How does that story continue to serve you moving forward? How does that story continue to serve you moving forward? How does that story continue to minister to you, encourage you, provide you with empathy, provide you with empowerment? How does that story really, really, really give you a sense of passion moving forward? I can remember tons of stories of when I thought crisis was going to be the end goal in my own life. I can remember a number of stories where God delivered me. I had just graduated with my master's degree, my master's in divinity, and I was leaving a graduation celebration. This was about 15 years ago. I was leaving a graduation celebration at my church for Graduate Sunday. And the next week, I was going to start my first job as a chaplain resident at a hospital that very next week. And that Saturday, as I'm driving home, I got T-boned in a terrible, terrible accident. And unfortunately, a woman decided to run a stop sign and she T-boned me. And when she T-boned me, she T-boned me so hard that my car shifted into reverse. And immediately my car spun backwards, turned into a circle, and I went head first into a tree. And I was immediately knocked unconscious. And the next thing I remember, my head hit the steering wheel. Immediately, my head hit the steering wheel and I went unconscious. And the next thing I remember was a group of doctors flashing lights in my eyes as I'm laying on an emergency room surgery table. And I remember them trying to say my name, but I could not respond because my face had swollen, my mouth had swollen, a couple of my teeth were knocked out, and I had a black eye from the angle of my head hitting the steering wheel. And unbeknownst to me, because I wasn't able to respond and my eyes weren't responding to the flashlight movement, doctors pronounced me dead. And the doctor in the emergency room at Northwestern Hospital goes to my mom and my family who have gathered in the waiting room, and they put them in the quiet room. And the doctors tell my mother, "I'm so sorry, your daughter has died in this car accident."
Oh my God.
And my mother starts crying immediately, and all my family is around. Paramedics would tell me the story later of someone reached into my to the car, pulled out my cell phone, and in my cell phone, I had my mom's number saved as mom. So they called my mom and said I was being rushed to the hospital when I was unconscious. So that's how my family arrived and knew what hospital I was going to, because the paramedics called from my cell phone. And I remember one of the nurses, African American nurse at the time, saw me making movements with my hand down on the side of the bed. And the nurse yelled out to the doctor, "No, she's still alive. She's still alive. She's not dead." And at that point, they began to rush back to me and start an IV on me and used electromagnetic shockers to jumpstart my heart and bring me into full consciousness. And I just began yelling and screaming so that they would know that I was still alive. And the pain that it caused my mom when my mother had started making phone calls to family saying that Danny died, the pain of these doctors having to come back out to my mom and say, "We made a mistake. She's still alive. We're so sorry. We thought she had died in this car accident." My mother says to this day, it is a memory she has never been able to, it is a memory she's never been able to live with. So one of the running jokes in my family is whenever I have met crisis in my life, I've always remembered this time like, nope, somebody, someplace, a doctor had counted you out, but you had to shout and scream and let them know I'm still here. And so no matter what happens to you in your life, even if you have to shout, I'm still here, when somebody has counted you out, that is what will minister to you. And so that's a story that I've held close to me in my own life, no matter what tragedy or crisis I have experienced in my life, right? So I would love to hear from you all. What's a story in your own life that you thought, I'm going to fail this, and then God delivered an answer and you survived it. And now every time you go through a future crisis, you replay, you remember. There's power in remembering. You remember this story. I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, y'all, come on. Kathleen listened to your story and she just said, my. But y'all, come on, tell y'all story. Oh my goodness. Yeah, that is, oh my God. That is, yeah, that was something. Lord have mercy. I got a little old story. I'll leave mine in my pocket. But there's a story I've said in the congregation before. I was in college. I was at SIU in Carbondale, and it was just the whole thing of me going away to college is just a drama in itself, because I was talking with my mom last week that I really didn't have any direction in high school about going to college. I just thought it was a given, and it didn't help that getting high and chasing girls and things like that. That didn't help me to get to college. So when I graduated in 1977, I didn't know what I was going to do until my parents said, "What, you ain't filled out no paperwork and nothing?" So, I get down there in 78, but it was that same year when I we had the summer, came home for the summer, and I went back, that August. And when I got, everybody had to go to the bursar's office, because you had to get your BEOG and SEOG, federal funds and whatnot.
Yeah.
For you to stay there. And so I'm in line, I get up to the window and everybody's getting their envelope, and the lady says, "There is nothing here for you."
Wow.
What?
Wow.
Hey, would you please? She said, I'm looking, there is nothing here but John Jackson. You do
Wow.
not have, and I just, I'm in the dorm. All of this is dependent on this check, right? I walk
Wow.
away from that window. I was, at, what, 18, 19, 17, 18 years old. I forget how old I was. It was just, I mean, that for me, that was the most traumatizing thing because I was the first of my siblings to go away to college. And so I walked away and I'm crying. And I walked to the end of campus. And at the end of campus, there were, it was a nice area where, had nice trees and whatnot. And I walked over to a tree. It was in the distance, it was away from people where, I just bawled my eyes. I said, I can't go home like this. I cannot go home. And I started calling, I started talking to God. I said, I can't, I don't know what else to do, but I can't go home. And I'm just blubbering and whatnot. And I'm looking at this tree while I'm talking. And I promise you, I'm looking at the tree. And then I turn away and I start crying. And then I look back up at the tree after a little while. There's a branch on the tree that wasn't there. I promise you, this branch wasn't there. It wasn't there. I'm looking at the tree and I see this branch, thick old branch coming from the trunk. And I'm like, where did that come from? And something said, go back. And so I go back to the Bursars. I get back in line. I go to the same window, the same person. She looks at me. She says, young man, I told you there's nothing here for you. I said, please, just check again. She goes through the envelopes again. And then her eyes get big and she pulled out the envelope for me. She said, I don't know what
Wow.
happened, but here's your envelope. And I walked away from that. And I never forgot that. And I never forget it till the day, because, it was at that point in my life, it was the worst thing that had ever happened. And I had no way to get out, and then that happened. So Kathleen says, both times I had a heart attack, I know that the Lord delivered me. This last time, I wake up and people are standing around and they are ready to count me out. But I woke and started telling them what to do because God is able. Oh my goodness.
Wow.
Oh my
Wow.
God.
Wow.
Oh my God. Oh
Wow.
my God. Yeah.
Wow. Wow. But it's very traumatizing when you're away at school and you don't have any and you
Yeah.
don't have any financial assistance. So
Oh
no,
my God.
my
Yeah.
heart goes out to you. And you're also very gracious, because I would have went off and said, look, this is a matter of like me having food to eat, lady, while you didn't see it. Like, that's amazing. That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing. That's
mm,
amazing.
mm, mm. My God. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
A third story that Dr. Edward Wimberly asked us to think about is a cultural heritage story from somebody from our African or African American history. Think about, so we've thought about a Bible story. We've thought about stories from our own crisis we faced in life. We've thought about biblical crisis stories that we replay to ourselves. Now, the next story we want to highlight is, Dr. Wimberly says, we should all have a cultural heritage character that went through some sort of crisis in life, and in some sense, their story inspires us. Their story inspires us. And so, who is that? Who is that? Who is that? Maybe it's more than one person. Maybe it's multiple people, right? Who is that? Who is that person? Who is those? Who are those people? I am often inspired by my grandmother, my maternal grandmother, and my paternal grandmother. My maternal grandmother worked as a nursing supervisor for a hospital, and then she went into teaching, and she believed in teaching nursing education for a hospital. So she inspired me to think about teaching, and one of the reasons I went into chaplaincy and teaching in chaplaincy is because of my grandmother's own life story and gifts and skills that she passed down to my mother, because my mother served faithfully as a teacher for Chicago Public School System before she retired. And then my paternal grandmother believed in don't work for nobody. Try to get away from working for corporate institutions. Start your own business, whatever that business is, and work for yourself. So my paternal grandmother inspired me to think about entrepreneurship and started my own business. And so I've always been inspired by my grandmothers, my paternal grandmother and my maternal grandmother. But I also have two African-American women in our African-American cultural history that I love to think about and reflect on. I have always been a huge fan of Harriet Tubman. I've always been a huge fan of Harriet Tubman. Look, I have a 13-year-old son, and just trying to get him to come alongside to do what I tell him to do is hard, let alone 300 African-American folks at night on an underground railroad, right? Who are in bondage, right? I can imagine that it was very hard for Harriet Tubman. And so I take my hat off to her, and I always remember her life. The second African-American woman from our Black history that I love to remember is Sojourner Truth. Sojourner Truth was an author, a writer, and I like to write, and I like to publish books and articles. And so she was known for, most people don't know, Sojourner Truth was actually a reverend. She was an ordained clergy. Most people don't know that. She stepped away from preaching to move full-time into writing. In some sense, right, she's known now primarily for being the author of her writings and liberation-minded writings that talked about freedom, especially freedom from African enslavement and Jim Crow. And so I think about my grandmothers, and I think about Harriet Tubman and Sojourner Truth when I think about culturally, in terms of cultural heritage, when I think about people in history who their stories have inspired me. Whose particular African or African-American persons, whether in your family or in history, in Black history, who have inspired you?
Wow. Yeah, Kathleen says Harriet Tubman was her story also. The things she did and overcame despite that illness, and that was those sleeping spells that she would go into as a result of that white slave owner who hit her with that iron. And Kathleen says WTTW told a very in-depth story about Harriet Tubman about a week or two ago. Okay, I gotta look that up. Yeah, mine. I got so many, in particular my family. My maternal grandparents were just anchors in my life. Both my maternal grandfather and grandmother. I'm named after my maternal grandfather, and John, and he was John Divine Favors. My mother named me John, and I just remember his stories. He was, he was the griot. And he would sit and tell the most spellbinding stories, both about our people and stories about morality and stuff like that. But he shared with me, I'm 6, 7 years old, and he shared with me about his grandfather who had been on a plantation enslaved. And he shared with me that his grandfather killed a couple of white guys because they gang raped his sister, and she died. And so he got a shotgun and he killed one, maybe two of them. And then he had to get out through the Underground Railroad. I didn't know
Wow.
what the Underground Railroad was until granddaddy shared with me that, he had to, as he's going through the woods and whatnot, he still had the shotgun. He came to this body of water that he had to cross, and he wanted to cross it for two reasons. One, to get away, but two, it would throw off the scent of the dogs. But
Wow.
the thing he had to do was, he said he had to dismantle his shotgun and take the barrel and use it to breathe while he was underwater to water crossing.
Wow. Wow.
So,
Wow.
he got up.
Wow.
In fact, actually, he came up to Indiana, southern part of Indiana, and met a Black woman, school teacher. They married and they went back down south to. They moved from. He escaped from a plantation in Georgia, and they went to Tennessee. And so that's I just never forget. I can't forget it. And the other stories he would tell. My other historical figures are, one is Queen Ya Asantewaa of the people, the Ashanti people of Ghana. And I'll never will forget when the English had taken the golden stool and had imprisoned the king. Queen Mother Ya Asantewaa was organizing to fight the British. The men were scared. And Queen Ya, the words are powerful. And she told the men, she said, if you all are she said, first of all, I cannot believe you are Ashanti people. You are Ashanti men, that you would let those white folk come in here and do that. He said, but nevertheless, if you won't fight, then the women will fight. And the day will be remembered that we will go fight, instead of you. And her speech was so powerful that the men got their butts in line. So she is, and then Fannie Lou Hamer. Fannie Lou she just sends shivers down my spine, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired, but the stuff she went through and the courage she had. So yeah, those are.
Oh, that's awesome. Those are awesome. Those are awesome. Yeah, those are awesome. Those are awesome.
This is incredible.
So the purpose of remembering those stories is to minister to ourselves. And we don't just remember those stories, but we actually, in some sense, need to write those stories down. Psalms 22, it is believed, is so powerful because what David is actually doing in Psalm 22 is he is participating in the art of remembering how God brought him through previous life crisis that will now minister to him currently. Remember how God brought other particular biblical characters through crisis and how that can encourage him. And also remembering how his own cultural tradition, as a part of the Israel lineage, particular ancestors from his Israel lineage can also, their stories can also minister to him in some sense. But more important, Psalm 22 is him showing the power of writing that down. It is not only David who who created these Psalms, but he actually wrote them down. He physically took a writing utensil and wrote them down. And that becomes the next learning for us. We believe a lost art is this device right here. A lost art is this device right here. It took me forever just to find a physical writing utensil in the current space I'm in at work. Why? Because we're so used to technology, iPhones, computers, iPads, right? This device is a lost art. What do we mean by that? In psychology, there is a psychological belief or theory that says literally, physically picking up a pencil or a pen and physically writing
Mhm.
on a piece of paper
Mhm.
will actually diffuse, decrease, or lessen your anxiety. Did you know that?
Mhm.
We've lost this art. There's not the same effect that occurs when we're actually typing on a computer. It's not, for some reason, psychologists say your emotions will not be diffused when typing on a computer. You have to literally pick up a physical utensil and physically write. And so, in some sense, writing your stories, those 3 stories we've talked about, writing those stories in a journal will actually make you begin to feel better. And so I challenge you, family, to grab a journal.
Mhm.
Here is my journal that I like to write in. Purchase a journal, a journal of any type, and practice physically writing with a physical utensil, writing in that journal, because you will begin to feel better. There's actually physical healing that
Mhm.
will begin to take place when you write. Most people don't know that we can actually heal from the art of writing in some sense. And so now, I know you're probably asking, well, what exactly happens what exactly happens when you write? I know that's a great question. In addition to writing, in some sense, lessening anxiety that you have or it began to experience and feel, the power of writing provides something else. Provides 2 or 3 other helpful uh, physical benefits. We say in this field. What are those benefits, you might ask? I'm so glad. I'm so glad you asked. In some sense, writing actually changes your mood. That's first and foremost. Did you know that as you write, not only does your anxiety lessen, but you begin to feel better? Writing actually changes your physical mood, emotional, your emotional state. Writing actually changes your emotional state. It changes your emotional state. You begin to feel better. Here are other psychological things that happen when you write. You begin to get out everything that you're holding on the inside. Everything that you're holding on the inside. Most people don't know this, but when David wrote the Psalms, that was actually him ministering to himself because he's externalizing everything that he feels internally. He's externalizing everything he feels internally. Also, writing helps you to connect with something. Writing helps you to connect with something, whatever that something is. Also, writing helps you to begin to understand your pain in relation to the world. That's right. Oftentimes, when we think about our own sense of pain or sadness, we begin to wrestle with, huh, we begin to wrestle with, I don't think my pain is valuable in the world, or I think other people's pain means more. That's not true. Your pain, your crisis, what you're going through deserves to be heard, deserves to be voiced. And writing helps you to begin to place your pain front and center in relationship to the world. Or the opposite can happen. When you think about writing your pain, writing your story, and you actually go through the act of writing it, in some sense, you begin to see the opposite. Your crisis may not be as big as you're making it out to be in relationship to the larger world, right? That's similar to the types of cognitive distortions we were talking about last week, where we are spending a lot of time making small issues in our life big, magnifying them when they're really small. Writing also helps us to work through things that we haven't put words to. It helps us really begin to put words to that thing that we've been wrestling with in our spirit. It really begins to help us put language to that thing that we dare not even utter aloud. And the cool thing about writing that I love even more, there's a popular meme that's been traveling social media. I'm sorry I don't have a picture of it, but you probably, I know, have seen it before, where there's a piece of paper where the person wrote their prayer to God. And it simply says at the top of the paper, "Dear God, comma," and then you see the drops of tears on the paper. The powerful thing about writing is that even if you don't have anything verbally to say, even if your tears fell on the paper, that's still expressing your feelings and getting your feelings out. And even if you wrote a prayer to God on paper that was just your tears, the goodness of God is God still answers those prayers too. God has answered prayers that my tears have prayed. And God has answered prayers that your tears have prayed. And so in some sense, writing is a wonderful act of healing that can occur for us. And so we want to invite you to pull out pen and paper and get a journal and just start writing. Just start writing and getting your feelings out. There's a physical power in that. Not texting, not typing, but literally grabbing a pen and a journal and writing. That is so powerful. I'll pause there. Any thoughts?
Yeah, Jeanette says, I keep a daily journal. She says, I enjoy it. And she says, over the years, I go back and read where I've been and what I've been through to help me with my daily lifestyle now. Wow. Yeah.
Hey.
Yeah. That's it. Yeah. I have a journal myself. And in fact, I still handwrite my eulogies. I write my sermons, but then I'll type them. But my eulogies, I still handwrite. Because it is spiritual. It's something spiritual about putting a pen in your hand, pencil in your hand, putting it to paper, and letting your heart pour through that. Yeah.
Wow.
Good
Wow.
Good
wow. 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 Thank you so much, family. Thank you.
Absolutely. So yeah, everybody. So, first of all, please share these, hit the share button from YouTube and share it with others, and also share that we shifted the time just a little bit from 1 to 2 o'clock on Tuesdays, but still the important and impactful content from the irrepressible and and awesome Dr. Buhuro. So y'all, we look forward to seeing you on next Tuesday at 1. But again, share this. I mean, this is another powerful one. And these stories, Kathleen, my God, your story about your heart attacks, and Jeanette, sharing about your journal, and the stories Dr. Buhuro shared. These are incredible. There is a African proverb that says, "No one is dead as long as you remember them."
Wow.
Oh yeah.
Wow.
Thank you all.